Smells so good. Today I'm gonna be whipping up some new produce bags. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel or welcome back to my channel. I'm Christine and today we're gonna be whipping up some new produce bags. So I, several years ago, made a handful of these produce bags using this really lightweight cotton and this cotton cording. And over the years, I've kind of whittled myself down to one because what would happen is I would see a friend at the farmer's market and they would say, oh my gosh, I love those bags. And then I would give them an extra. And so I only have one left. And I thought it was time to make some new ones. So now let's talk about the best fabrics to use for our bags. So this is the very first one I made. This is a super lightweight cotton batiste. So you can almost see through it. The biggest consideration when choosing your fabric for the bags is the weight. So some places where I shop will actually weigh the bags separately before, as I walk in, so before I fill it with things. And they'll actually subtract the weight of the bag from the weight of my purchase, which is great. Other places, like at the farmer's market, they just don't have the capacity to do that. And so you really want them to be as light as possible. So I've actually experimented with using this lace. So this lace is super lightweight, but actually very strong. So I made this one out of lace with just a fabric cord. And then I made others in this just lightweight cotton that I think is gonna get even lighter as I wash it. Lightest weight possible that you can find. You could do old curtains. This kind of actually reminds me of curtain fabric. You could use an old t-shirt. You could use old sheets, old bed linens, anything you can find or thrift or scrap that is really lightweight. So for sizes, I love this size, which is finished 10 inches wide by 12 inches long. For me, this is the size I use the most, use it putting spinach, lemons, green peppers, avocados, everything pretty much goes in this size of a bag. It's just the one I use the most. So that is finished 10 by 12 inches. My little extra small one is finished 5 by 6 inches. If you buy a lot of produce and you want bigger bags or you do lettuce type of stuff, a medium size that you could do would be 12 inches by 15 inches high. So 12 inches wide, 15 inches tall. And then even larger than that, you could do 14 inches wide by 18 inches tall. So those are some sizes, but the one that I love the most is this 10 by 12. So the way this bag goes together is we're gonna use 1/4 inch seam allowances on either side, and then we're gonna fold under 1/2 inch on the top. So if we just take our finished measurements and add 1/2 inch, we're gonna be just fine. And obviously these don't have to be so exact. Next, you want to consider the tie. So there's two different ways that I've done the ties. One is this cotton cording that's 1/8 of an inch. So this, I have a hard time finding this in the small enough width. And it can be a bit expensive. If you're making a lot of these, it can add up, but it is rather lightweight. The other option that I've been doing on this most recent round is I've been making my own out of just these little strips. And that's what we're gonna do today. I'm gonna show you exactly how I do this. And that's how I do my drawstrings, at least with this round that I've been making. These make lovely gifts or even items to sell at a handmade market or on Etsy or in your local market. So I've just packaged 2 of my bags together. And if you remember this sleeve from the video I did making our kitchen towels, I just used the same sleeve. You can see it even says kitchen towels. So you can use that same sleeve that you did for kitchen towels on your bags. And in that video, I did a walkthrough of exactly how I make these. So I'll drop it here so you can check it out after this one. All right, so now we're ready to get started sewing up our bags. Okay, so I am going to cut out my fabric. So I have folded my fabric. So I'm going to have the fold at the bottom of my bag, which makes it just a little bit stronger. So we're gonna do 12.5 inches high by 10.5 inches wide. Okay, so there I have my bag. When I open this out, I have a long piece of fabric. So right sides together, I am going to prepare to sew this side and this side. But the thing is that we need to leave a hole or make a hole so that our cord can go through on the outside. So this is the bottom of my bag, and so I just need to choose one side of my upper bag here. And I'm going to measure down. This one I'm going to use my tape measure just so we can see it a little bit better. And I'm going to measure down 3/4 of an inch from the top. And I'm just going to place a mark there, or you could even just place a pin through both of your layers to mark it that way. Then we're going to add a second marking at 1 1/8 of an inch. So I'll just add another one there. And so you could either add a second pin there or just your marking. And in between this little space, we're not going to sew. So we're going to sew from the top of our bag to the first marking and then leave this space open and then sew this down. So again, it's just 3/4 of an inch from the top of our bag, and then it's 1 1/8 inches. 1 inch, 1/8 from the very top of our bag. And those are your 2 markings. Now, before I sew my bag together down the outer edges, I really want this fabric phrase, just a little bit. And I really want these bags to last a long time. So what I'm gonna do is take this to my serger, and I'm gonna serge all of the 4 outer edges as single layer fabric. And that way, as I sew this up, all my edges are gonna be nice and neat. The stitch I'm using to finish off these edges is my 3-thread overlock narrow. You can see this is giving me a nice finished edge without a lot of bulk. So this is the lightest, most narrow stitch my machine does. Now I have all my edges nice and finished off, and I'm going to fold my bag top edge, so matching my side edges, and the one side I'm just going to sew all the way down normally, and the other side I'm going to make sure to pay attention to the markings we did here and just leave this little section open on the other side. So let's start with that side first. I'm going to be sewing these with about a 1/4 inch of a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once I get to my first marking, I'm just gonna do a nice 3 or 4 stitches back of a back stitch, and then give this a snip, and then I'm going to start at my other marking right here. And I'm going to start with a good back stitch as well, 3 or 4 stitches. And then just finish sewing the rest of my seam. So we've got our bag all sewn on the 2 sides with a little opening on one of them. So now I'm going to take this to my ironing board and do a little bit of pressing. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of press the seam open just a little bit to make it just a bit neater as we fold down our casing. So just give this a quick press. Now we're going to fold down our casing, and I like to start on the side that has the little hole there, and we're just going to fold down the 1/2 inch. So once we fold a 1/2 inch, then we have the casing there on the right side, the outer side. So I'm just going to fold down this 1/2 inch I'm eyeballing this because it doesn't need to be so exact. As long as you get the whole part right. The rest, I just kind of eyeball. So I'll press down my whole casing. Now that I've pressed in my casing, I'm going to take it right on over to my sewing machine and get this casing top stitched down. So I'll flip my bag right side out, and I'm actually going to top stitch this from the wrong side. So I'm going to sew right along this edge. I'll start at one of the seams because I will do a back stitch, and I'm just going to sew right along the edge of the folded down casing. Okay, voila. At this point, we have our bag all sewed. So you can see this is how the inside looks. And this is how the outer side with the hole looks. So this is where we're gonna thread through our tie. So this is my well-loved bag. I'm using just this really fine, I think this is actually a cotton tie. You can see I've made it just maybe 2 inches larger than the circumference of the top of the bag. So the point is here, we don't need any extra bulk on these bags. And so I like to make my ties just as, not overabundance in the length, I guess. So I usually just make it about, 2 inches total larger than the top circumference of my bag. So if you have already a pre-made tie, all you have to do is just thread that on through. I somehow have a really hard time finding the right ties that are fine enough. So I just make my own. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So to do my ties, all I do is make this little, a little strip that's like folded under and finished. I don't know if you can see. So I just use my bias tape maker. This is the number 12. So these are universal size. So this is the yellow one, which makes looks like a 1/4 inch. Let me just measure. Yep, it's a 1/4 inch wide tie. So to get the fabric through my bias tape maker, I need to cut a strip that is 7/8 of an inch wide. And that's what I'm going to feed through here to get my ties. So to get the right length of my tie, I know that this is a 10-inch opening, so 20 inches total. I want to add 2 inches, so that's 22 inches. And then I'm going to add a couple inches because I like to do a knot at the end of mine, which stops fraying. And as I put this in the washer and the dryer, the ends sort of fray. So I'm gonna probably cut about at least 24 inches or so to get the tie for my medium-sized bag. 24 inches long by 7/8 of an inch wide. And I'll just cut this end. Okay, so I have my strip, and now I'm just going to take it and my bias tape maker to the ironing board. I wanted to make a quick note that I did not cut my bias tape on the bias. And why did I do this? Well, because we're just using this as a straight, we're not working on curves essentially. So when you make bias tape that you're going to be using around a curve, you definitely want to cut it on the bias because that gives you that little bit of stretch. But when we're just making these like little ties for our produce bags, I don't need any stretch and I don't want to waste fabric by cutting it on the bias. So I've just cut it whatever direction I have the most fabric, and that's what we're going to use. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is just start feeding one end of my strip right through my bias tape maker. And I have a pin here because sometimes I need to just take the pin and kind of help it feed through. So once I have it fed through, there we go. And then I kind of do this thing where I sort of pull it. This strip always stays nice and taut, and I'll just move this down to the end just so I don't waste. And yeah, get it even. So the biggest trick is you want your strip to go through the bias tape maker evenly on either side. So I'm just going to get it started, and I pull this tight, and then I just feed my iron on the other side of it. And then I have my bias tape, but in this case, it's not bias. Okay, so there I have both of the edges pressed under, and now you can either fold this and press it with your iron, so fold it. I normally don't. I just take this to my machine, and we're just gonna top stitch this to create our strip. Okay, now at my sewing machine, I just am going to fold those raw edges right inside. So folding this tape in half, and I'm just gonna top stitch right along the edge there. So sometimes my machine can have just a little bit of a hard time, like this will get stuck in the feed dogs. So I like to sew my first stitch by hand. So I'm just turning the hand wheel and then taking my thread tails, and I'm just gonna hold them, not pulling them, but I'm like holding them taut behind until my machine gets started. Because I don't necessarily want this to get stuck in the feed dogs. So now I'm on my way. It's not gonna get caught anymore. All right, there is our strip. Okay, now we've got our bag and our tie. So I have a safety pin. I'm just going to feed this through our hole. So just through one end. And then I'm going to find the hole at the top of my bag and just start feeding this through. Sometimes when you get to the seam here, your safety pin won't go through. And so I kind of have to wiggle it a little bit to get inside of that seam allowance. There we go. And then I can just keep passing through. Okay, so I've passed the drawstring through the top of my bag. So then I just go through and make sure that it's not twisted. If it's twisted, then I kind of have to reverse it. There we go. So it's all nice and flat, and then I just match up my ends like so, and then I'm going to tie these into a knot. So like so. It's a little tricky, and I want the knot to be as close to the end as possible. So I'm just going to move that down so it's right at the end. And voila, our bag is done. We have our drawstring and it closes nice and tight. Now this is the small size. Let's test this out. I have, let's see, 5 lemons here. So this is 5 lemons, really nice strong bag, good size. And if you'd like to package your produce bags with the little sleeve, I did a tutorial walkthrough when I was talking about the kitchen towels, but you can use the exact same wraps that I did. So I will drop the link to that video here so you can take a look and make these really, really cool professional wraps and either give these as gifts or sell them. Yeah. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.